the panel list, if you don't mind just switching off your video and your putting mute on for now, just so that the panelists will be at the front and you'll be able to see them when they're talking. So for those of us just joined us, if you don't mind just putting mute on and putting your cameras, turning your cameras off right now, that would be great. Thank you very much. Well, hello, welcome to our first ever panelcast for the sports marketing and events industry. So a little bit of housekeeping just then. So if everyone that is joining can make sure that you've got your cameras off and you have muted yourself, that would be great. So throughout this time, we've had quite a lot of questions come in, which has been fantastic. So we've put down the list of questions that we're going to get through tonight. If you have questions as we're going through and talking to the panel, if you go down to the bottom, you'll see that there's a little chat section. So if you click on the chat, that'll give you an option to then type as a message. I'll be taking notes of those questions, and at the end of our discussion, I'll sort of summarize them and we'll put them out to the panel. All right. So just quickly for people that don't know me, I'm Hailey Mason. I've got 17 or 18 years within the sports marketing and events industry. For the last 9 years, I've also run an agency, and my business partner CT is on the line. He is one of the panelists as well. And this idea to start the Shift Panelcast came from us speaking to a lot of our suppliers and clients and friends within the industry, and realizing that there wasn't a space or a group for us to be able to chat and connect at this time, and to figure out how we can plan moving forward. We're going to be about shifting mindsets for a positive change. So we understand that there is a lot of negativity going on at the moment, but what we want to try and do is make this a positive conversation. And making this a positive conversation, hopefully we can develop better relationships out of it, that different products, different events, different assets for your own businesses will come out of this, and that we can start connecting a lot more online together. So today we're going to be looking at adaptability, the economy, offline to online, and then a mix of that, and then what we see in the future for 6 to 9 months. Our idea was to bring in a panel of people. We're going to do a panel from people around our industry and people that are connected to our industry in different ways every week. And we'll have a different theme every week. So thank you again to those of you who had questions. And for people that have just joined us, we have had quite a lot of questions come through. We've managed to compile those, so we're going to start those. If you've got other questions throughout the panel, please feel free just to go into the chat section and write them down, and at the end we'll try and get through as many as we can. We also have our Facebook group, the Shift Panelcast, so you can go on there afterwards. We'll chat and try and speak to you as much as possible. So the largest takeout that we want to give you in the short term is how to transition and to plan for the next 6 to 12 months and what that looks like for launching events. We are not saying that we have the answers to that, but we think that the panels that we put together and all the people that are online and that have joined us now, we all want this, and we all want to know how to move forward. And you know, this is not going to last forever, this situation that we're in, but how can we plan for the next 6 to 12 months to make sure that our industry changes for the better? So just to introduce our panelists. So we have CT, who I said was my business partner. So he is an events and sports marketing expert. He's known for his innovation and creativity. He has over 20 years experience on the agency and on brand side. And essentially at this time, CT and I obviously on a lull in business, and we're looking to pivot our business into the next stage of what events look like. So, and as I said, that's where this idea of having a panelcast came from. Then we've got Jamie. Say hi, Jamie.
Hey, guys.
So Jamie is the Chief Financial Officer for the St. George Illawarra Dragons. So as you can imagine, being one of the largest codes in the country, Jamie has had a lot to deal with in the last month. And not just a lot to deal with, but there's a huge impact that will have on our whole country because of the halt of the sport. So we're going to hear from Jamie with that, and he's going to be taking us through how he has managed to, one, get his club to where it is today and what he is looking for in the future with his club. Next, we have Taz.
G'day, everyone.
Hey, Taz. So Taz is from the Black Dog Institute. He's the partnerships manager. And their purpose is to develop a mentally healthier world. And I think that because the events and sports marketing industry, we got hit by this probably before a lot of industries. We are probably seeing a lot of those mental health issues come through already. And we want to know how to access those tools and access the resources to help out our employees or our staff or our colleagues. And then we have Nikki. Nikki, are you there?
She's on mute.
She's here. She's here.
She was
You're on
here.
mute, Nikki.
Nikki, could you unmute yourself, please?
There we go.
There you are. And can we see you on the camera? Are you
Can you see
there.
me?
We can. Yes.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
You're here.
Hi.
Hi.
So Nikki is live from her quarantined hotel room.
Yes.
So,
I apologise about the dim lighting. That's the lighting options I've got.
Nikki departed from her role as executive producer on Friday from the Red Bull Racing Formula One team over in Milton Keynes, and that's where Nikki's been for the last 5 years. So Nikki has worked in event content probably since it began, I would say, Nikki.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And basically what Nikki is a specialist at is being able to take the content from an event and put that online, and then go and look at these other events and other assets that we provide by doing events, and basically increase the viewers that get to see that. So what Nikki's going to give us a bit of an insight today about is how we can use online content right now and how it might look in the future for events. So that is our panelists. We can get started. So one of the biggest questions we had actually was around, like, what do we do? Like, what should we expect? Which, you know, is a very hard question. So look, the government have said that we are fighting two wars. We're fighting health issues, and we're fighting the economy. And how do we do that without completely causing pressure on our health system, but also keeping our economy alive? Now, that in turn has affected our industry. I'm actually going to throw this to CT. So just to put into perspective where we are now and what can we expect, and is it possible right now to forecast how our industry is going to look?
Yeah, sure. The nice curly one to get started. I think in the short term, you know, what we're talking about is the health aspect is what's hurting us currently. You know, with social distancing and, you know, bans and public gatherings, you know, live events are obviously massively affected. And that's not news to anyone. It's certainly not news to anyone who's sitting in this room right now. For us, the biggest issue is really, you know, no real end date to plan towards. And, you know, obviously we're all planners and we're used to that. So not knowing where we're heading or, you know, what that's going to be is something that's a real issue for us at the moment. But something we do know, I guess, is that, we know it's going to end. We're going to end, it's going to end, and it's going to go on. So in the short term, that's what we're sort of looking at. Looking at the long-term effects, the economic downturn. And obviously, I'm going to put my economist hat on here, but I'm not an economist. So maybe Jamie can pipe in on this later. But, I'll keep it simple. But, the economists are saying that we've moved into an L-shaped recession, and this is something that is something that's seen every 30 years. I'll put it in the graph sense. I'll do my graph. So essentially, the economy is falling, away quickly, and it's accentuated by COVID. And then we're going to have this plateau, flat section, which they're saying is going to last and run for the next 18 months. So to break that down, what we're talking about here is, or how economists see it really, is that in the first 3 months, everyone is in deep shock, and trying to work out what's going on, and that at this point, in this instance, in this 30 years, we're talking about, this is through COVID. We're looking at a recession anyway, but the massive effect of it is through COVID. From the 3 to 9 months period, within that, we're inside that 3 month period right now. The 3 to 9 month period, we're really talking about clearing up after the aftermath, and working out what to do. And then from 9 to 18 months, we're talking about, this is okay, it's time to rebuild. Okay, we're heading towards this 18-month period. And what that's going to do is bring us towards September 2021, is what they're saying. From 21 to 2031, we're looking at this 10-year growth phase. And we can essentially use that as a guide for planning. We do have so much uncertainty. However, we can use that as businesses as a guide for planning. I guess the hard part is this shock and emotional phase, and getting through that right now, to being able to move into being prepared to take full advantage of that growth phase, when it does come in. I guess the only other thing I would say around this is, the exciting part is, this is going to bring about, amazing innovation. It's going to bring about companies and people's adaptability and flexibility, and we're seeing a lot of that already, and creativity. So that's what I would say. Great,
thank you. So Jamie, are you able to talk more specifically about your club and what it's done, what you and your team have done financially with your staff and suppliers to secure the club's future, not just in the next 3 to 6 months, but also on a longer term?
Yeah, sure. First and foremost, it was, as Chris just said, the first 3 months is critical. So what we did is we broke it down even shorter than that for the first one. We've done the first 5 weeks of this event when we know our game was shut down. So the first thing we did as an organisation was look after our staff and secure their employment for that 5-week period. So we could just continually get information that was going from our major, our head office in a way, the NRL, and know that our staff were going to be secure, and know what our funding was going to be for the rest of the season, because a lot of our NRL clubs were funded directly from the NRL centrally. So what we did is secured everyone's employment, and then we started a cost out program across the business, which we have done over the next 3 months, because we do now know that we won't, as a co, be back playing till at least July at the earliest. There's an option that we're back in July, August or September. We can actually start a competition as late as September. And so at this point in time, we're well placed. We've taken all the costs out of the business. We've gone with our suppliers. Our next one outside of staff is our stadiums. That's probably our next biggest individual that we deal with. And we've got quite large stadium deals, as you'd know, running multiple home games across multiple venues throughout a year. So we've sat down and negotiated with those stadiums what's going to happen when games are played behind closed doors without fans and members being allowed to be in the venue, and also with the games being suspended at both of our stadiums. And the third one is also the SCG. They've been fantastic, but Venues New South Wales, the SCG, and Georges River Council with Jubilee Stadium have been excellent. We've been able to negotiate what's going on with those venues, because every time we put on a game, it's an event, and we make it an event, and we've got to make sure that that stadium is aligned to what's happening in our game, and they've got all the information we can possibly give to them. Then it was suppliers, and we have gone through, we've renegotiated every contract, every lease that we have on file at the moment to be either suspended or work through an extended contract where we've given someone an additional year, because this year is looking like we're not going to get a lot of content for a lot of our events companies that we use, because game days, if coming back in July, are likely still to be behind closed doors. So the games will be played, but there'll still be no fans, no members. So that really takes away from the event aspect. But what's that completed for us now? We've been able to extend out all of our contracts and renegotiate and secure the funding from the NRL. We've now got the next 3 to 6 months cash flow sorted, and we're now pushing through to that 9-12 months cash flow situation to ensure that all clubs are sustainable. Now, I can look after my club and make it sustainable, but at the end of the day, I can't play football against myself. So the one thing we all have to do is come together as clubs, and we have been doing that with the NRL and ensuring that everyone survives this. So every fan can enjoy the game that we all play, but also enjoy the future that is ahead. And there is a positive future ahead, and there's no doubt about it. So that's what we've done so far.
Thank you. Now, when we had a quick chat today, and you were mentioning that you've got quite a few event managers within your team.
Yes.
That they, pretty much out of the blue, didn't have any work to go to, and I found it fascinating what you had decided to do so that you could keep them long term on your teams and invest in them personally.
Yeah, well, they were probably one of the first people to get a pretty big shock when the competition was suspended, because they do 40 events a year, and all of a sudden we couldn't have gatherings, we couldn't have people in rooms, we couldn't have fans at stadiums. So they thought straight away that they were going to be stood down. Across the game, funnily enough, there was a phone conference with the event managers, and when they got on that phone call, they were one of 3 clubs left that weren't stood down at that stage, which was quite a shock for them all. But our view was we need to protect every staff member, and everyone has different skill sets. So both my 2 have been excellent at what they're doing. One has been learning a lot of background video, and the other's very good at graphic design. So what we've been able to do is move those into our digital program for the next 6 to 8 months whilst we're going through this crisis. But they've got a job, they're secure in what they're doing, and they've been able to really enhance the digital program we've got, because the digital program now at our club is bigger than ever and more important than ever to service all of our current sponsors that we have. Yeah,
great. Now, with staff, you mentioned that there was quite a few clubs that did stand down their event managers. Yep. I'm actually just going to ask this is another question that came up about what it is doing to people's mental health. And, there's different businesses throughout the whole industry, and people are reacting to it very, very differently. So some people are, knee-jerk reaction, shutting it down. Some people are taking a more cautious or controlled approach. Nobody saw this coming. So Taz, can I just ask you, out of interest, Black Dog is a mental health institute and all about, the general population's mental health, but also their staff. What have they done for you guys?
Yeah, thanks, Hailey, and thanks very much for putting this session together tonight. It's been it's really interesting to be part of. So Black Dog, I guess, was, I think, on the front foot of this crisis and really got ahead of the curve when it came to looking after their staff. And what we sort of realised quite quickly this was going to be a really serious event, and they sent us home. We've been working from home for 2 weeks now. But what we didn't anticipate, which no one really could have, was just the absolute flood of requests and help for people that are starting to go into mental unwellness during this period. So we're running a survey, so first and foremost, we're a medical research into mental health, the only one in Australia. So we started to research what was happening in this space. And I just thought I'd share a couple of quick facts for what we're finding out and that people are telling us. And that is, look, 25% of respondents say that their mental health is a lot worse since the virus. 57% say their mental health is a little worse. 50% are feeling lonely, and another 50% are feeling worried about their financial situation. 80% are feeling uncertain about the future, which look, makes sense. We're all really uncertain. And 50% are concerned about contracting the virus, and 80% are concerned that their family and friends will contract the virus. So we're seeing a stark shift in mental illness across Australia. And I guess from Black Dog's perspective, as with Jamie, the first and foremost was to lock our staff down and make sure that they were okay. And they've done that through, firstly, getting us home and making sure that we could connect. So it's really simple things like, does your video work? Do you have access to the network drive? Can you work from home? Because that can be really debilitating. So they started with that. They then have a really fantastic inclusive program of getting people involved in day-to-day activities. So at 10:30 there's yoga. At 11 o'clock there's classes right throughout the day, and staff take them all day. And we did it on the platform called Teams, Microsoft Teams, which is a really great platform to have lots of people video conferencing. So they put a lot of work into making sure that we are okay. There's a great access to EAP, and I'm sure that everybody on the call has a really strong EAP, so encourage your staff to do that. But there's one thing that you need to do, and I would really recommend, and that is talk to your teams every day and ask them how they are. You know, my teams that I look after were okay, but in the last couple of days, a couple of my team members have put their hand up and said, actually, no, I'm not. I'm really struggling. So have that conversation with the people in your teams, and don't be afraid to ask how they are.
I've also noticed we actually have a couple of subcontractors that have logged on tonight. So they haven't necessarily got that, I suppose, that structure around them, or that company and business to know. Something that we have done is just try to keep our suppliers and contractors informed as much as possible on what we know is happening. That is obviously changing, and we're making, I think this probably goes back to Jamie, is that we can't make plans 3 weeks, 5 months ahead, but we can say, look, this is where we're at right now. We're going to touch base again in 2 weeks or in a month. Or is that something that Black Dog's recommending?
Yeah, look, Black Dog is saying over communicate at every opportunity. So we are we get a daily update from our CEO, and sometimes there's nothing in there. Sometimes the other day she was playing the flute, and she did that simply so that you could see her and you could connect with her and understand and ask questions. So over communicate, over talk, nurture, love your staff, and give them everything that you can, because you'll get that back. So do that via emails, via your online chats, and via video, but just talk to them as much as you possibly can. Yeah,
great. Thank you. We've just had a question in from Wes, which is very similar to another question that we've had previously. Jamie, I'm going to go back to you again, because this is probably most relevant to you. So sure. When this all happened and started, as the CFO, your main concern would have been income.
Yes.
So you, as a business, you rely a lot on sponsorship and obviously ticketing income. So how did you work with your sponsors? Have they been open to your suggestions on how this can play out over the next year?
Yeah, thanks. What we did first and foremost was after our staff was look at our revenue and our major sponsors. We're really lucky though. We're in a great spot at St George Illawarra. We have St George Bank as our major partner, and I have to say that the relationship we've had for them for so many years is so important right now. They have been outstanding during this period of time. We are unsure, all of us are unsure when our season will come back online and begin again. But I have to say that it's the one confidence we had is the major partners that are behind the club were not going to run away or turn their back. They were going to stand with us, and they have done that so far. We've been very lucky. We've had no one in the major sponsor sense turning away from the club. They've all stayed very solid, and we're working with them. We're working as hard as we can in the digital space to provide a lot of content to our members and our fans and keep relevance to everybody and keep them with as much information as we have to as quickly get back on the field as we possibly can, and to be providing TV content for people to consume. So I have to say our major sponsors have been outstanding. So I couldn't be happier at this point in time.
Right, and I'm going to make an assumption here that is about relationships and the relationships that you have.
Yeah, 100%. We've got great people that manage the relationships within our firm with all our major partners, and they've done an outstanding job. And that relationship management has, really come to the floor in this scenario where our competition's been suspended, but everyone's standing beside each other. So it's been fantastic.
Sure. And look, there is a lot of people that are on, they're online now that, aren't necessarily in the stadium or large sports area.
Yep.
But I think probably CT, you might be good to answer this from an event agency perspective. How do we keep these relationships going when there's no events getting planned right now? Or sorry, not no events, no live events getting planned right now.
Yeah. Look, I guess it's all about strong. This is alluding back to what yourself and Jamie were just talking about. But everything is about strong relationships and those strong partnerships, whether it be with suppliers or sponsors or clients. A lot of our suppliers we would call mates now. Those are people who we have worked with for a long time, and as anyone who would say in this industry, whether it's events or within the sports space, or it doesn't have to be the sports space, within the event space, but within this industry, we're always in it together. There's always a last minute something. There's always a how do we get this done? And everyone is pulling together to make that happen. And we're in it together, and even it's probably even more so now. We're in it together because it's such a crazy situation, and everyone is in a position right now where they all need help. We all need to stick together, and really come together as a community. It's about with the relationship, it's about open conversations. It's about knowing where, for them, it's about knowing where they stand and where you stand and what's going on and what are the updates, and when is this event that's being postponed, is it gone, or is it likely to come back on, and when is that happening, and how does that work? Because cash flow is obviously a big concern for everyone. There's sort of no surprises there. It's about managing expectations and understanding, what's happening, and just having that open conversation, I guess. And maybe out of this, let's think of this positively. We're going to have stronger relationships, to start. That's the first thing, and everyone is going to continue to stick by each other. But maybe out of this, we'll have some, new offerings and new asset that can be used. We'll come up with this together with our partners or our suppliers, and it will be something that we can take forward into the future.
And that is something that we've discussed quite a bit about. What most of our events have either been postponed. We've had quite a few that have been cancelled within this period. So we are probably looking at a 2 to 3 month period of not a lot of work on events is going to be done. And so a lot of people in our industry are going to have a lot of downtime. We've discussed this quite a bit, and I like your point of view on what we should do. This is how PanelCast started, actually. Do you want just to sort of say about the ideas that we've come up with? And these aren't, sorry, I should say, this isn't just from an agency point of view. Yeah. So this isn't just, you know, from an agency point of view or a brand point of view. This is across the board, you know, just from an individual point of view, is maybe something that will also help our mental health of what we can start doing.
Yeah. So look, I guess the problem here is in our downtime. First up, we can't go surfing, so we're not allowed to. But you know, I guess to take it away, like looking to the positives, you know, it's an opportunity. Let's take this downtime as an opportunity. You know, it's an opportunity for us to work on, you know, business planning for the future. As very busy people in the industry, and I'm sure most of the people on this right now would be in the same situation. Is you don't always have a lot of time for that space. And so this is a great time right now to be looking at business planning and future for the business or for your organisation. It's a great time. I know I'm being pegged as this, but it's a great time for innovation. It's a great time for looking at and thinking about things differently. You know, we're really about creating out without any boundaries. And so for us, you know, we're thinking about, okay, innovation. We're thinking about creating new event concepts. We're thinking about new technology. What else can we do? What can we develop? What can we use into the future, or what's going to help us now or in the future?
Sorry to interrupt you there, but Trevor's also just posted like a really positive response from the entertainment industry, is looking how the ballet and opera and theatre, and they're streaming their performances now. So as an immediate response, that's fantastic. And it's so positive that people are doing that. And we're going to be looking at some point, they'll go back to a live, right? So there's going to be different stages in that, which I think we'll definitely get to later.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And in the short term, that's exactly what people should be doing.
Perfect. Jamie, just sorry, I know I'm targeting you at the moment, but I think it's because we're in this financial period at the moment where people are really looking to money and they're looking for answers for that. I know that you don't have a crystal ball, but what do you think the spending patterns might be for people that are going to, you know, when this does get lifted, the social distancing, and it'll probably get lifted in stages, as we saw, we got put into lockdown in different stages, and it will go back. What do you think, mainly from a spectator perspective, of what the spending patterns might be, and how much you think that's going to impact your specific events?
Well, good question. I'll break it down in a couple of parts if I can. First and foremost, I think the spending patterns, for a start with people. At the moment, I would say families probably tended prior to this virus, maybe see 3 to 4 different sorts of events, be it a football game, go to the movies throughout a month. And single people or couples probably did more to 6 to 8 different sorts of activities in a month. I think you'll find that a family will go down to more 1, maybe 2 in a month. And the single and couples will probably go down to maybe a 4. So what people will start to do is they'll start to think about their events that they're going to. Well, I think in the past, people were just out having fun and could dart to any event they like. Now they're going to be targeted in the next short term anyway. But the one good thing is, with them all being isolated, everyone's going to want to get out and see some events. So the positive is, I think we've got to give people choice and events to be put on, because people are going to want to go out and consume it because they've been in their homes for so long. But so I think the appetite for people are going to be there. So that's really positive for us going forward. What are they going to be willing to pay though? That's going to have changed from in the past. So again, that's where I think it's going to be really important for event managers, certainly mine, and I'm challenging them at the moment. As Chris said, a great time for planning, but we've got to plan for when we come back online. How do we put on a game day? And it is expensive to run big stadiums, I'll tell you that now. So we make our money through the gate takings, and that sort of sometimes offsets what it costs to run a venue, but it's a minimum of 80 to 100,000 to run a standard game day cost. So it's not cheap, and we need to lower the ticketing prices or come up with ticketing offers which are enticing to be one of those events a family choose to go to, or an individual or a couple choose to go to, and make it an event that they're worth spending their small amount of disposable income they'll have left, and come and enjoy a game of football. So, and I think it's critical for all event managers. You know, they're going to have to look at their offering, try and minimise the price, but get people back engaged. And you're going to get a new market. I think we'll get new markets of people coming to our games. And I think any event that's run, you're going to see new markets from these people who have been isolated, wanting to get out and actually enjoy a live event again.
Yeah, I totally agree that.
Count me in too.
I agree that a lot of people, once, you know, they're pretty stuck at the moment and they want to get out, and they're going to want to get out, but because of where the economy is at, they might not want to pay those price points across the board.
Yeah.
Nikki, I'm going to ask you this question, if that's all right, because we are seeing a lot of events go online at the moment, and eventually they're going to go back to being live. There's a lot to be said for content, and there's some events that have had content already, but there's some events that don't at all. And I'm just wondering, what are other companies doing at the moment to sort of fill that void, and what are they talking about? And, you know, can you give us some insight?
Yeah. I mean, there's some really great examples. Trevor touched upon it, and the entertainment industry jumped on it very, very quickly, with live streaming, you know, performances, museums doing virtual tours, putting that online, national parks doing the same, zoos. There's so much out there, and people at the moment, they need content because, you know, we're all kind of stuck at home. So it's being consumed, you know, probably more than, nobody's got numbers, but you can just imagine. I mean, each us as individuals, we're, you know, upped our content intake. So I guess there's two sides of it. You've got some brands, most brands will probably have existing content. So what can they do with that to repurpose it? Taking F1 as an example, you know, they're highlighting some classic races. So, you know, revisiting that, which they didn't really do in the past. So, and sometimes the races are in their entirety. Sometimes they take snippets and just, you know, throwing out like great moments from, you know, the history of racing. NFL are doing that really well in America, as they are in baseball as well. So they're looking at their archive content and seeing how they can repurpose it, which is great. But then it's about adapting to the new technology, and, you know, how do you put things out there in the now? You know, talk shows are being hosted from people's couches, which is great. So you've got people like Jimmy Kimmel or Fallon who are still going about their shows, but they've just adapted to the time. So there's some really good examples out there of how people have, you know, taken the content that they have already in their archives and repurposing that, but then also using the technology that we've got to continue to create content, because, you know, none of us can film at the moment. You know, there are no events. You can't take film crews into a workplace either, because all of that is certainly in the F1 world, it's considered non-essential. So although factories are still, turning out whatever they are, they have to minimise who is going into work and so forth. And certainly for, film crews have been shut down.
Nick, can I just ask, is that a strategy, or is that a strategy for these businesses to get new people engaged, or is it to keep their existing attendees or existing audience? I mean, are people strategizing that now?
You would have to say that at the moment. I mean, I can speak to F1, but it's certainly about keeping your current audience engaged with the hope of continuing to grow it, of course. There's been a F1 has shifted into esports at the moment. So there is a lot of races being held, and they're engaging the current drivers, but also looking outside of that. So for instance, there's going to be a race on this weekend, and they've invited along Ben Stokes, who's a cricketer, and he's just happens to be an esports enthusiast. So, he's not a driver, but he's going to join in a virtual race. So that's, hopefully bringing a different audience to the existing audience as well. So you see pockets of examples like that, and I think it's just about tapping into what is available.
Yeah, right. Thank you. I have also known when it comes to content, a lot of other businesses are, have that content from their existing assets. Now, when I'm talking about assets, I'm talking about, from our point of view, an event. But then sometimes you need something else to talk about. So, Taz, I suppose from a fundraising perspective, you guys do a lot of events and a lot of corporate events. But right now, your content is a lot more driven to helping those businesses that would normally be part of your events. And this is a total segue. But I'm really interested because all of the content that Black Dog have been putting out now goes back to your actual purpose of helping the general public with mental health. So are you able just to let us know what it is that Black Dog, sort of the resources that are available through content consumption, we'll call it?
Yeah, absolutely. Just before I do that, what I thought I might reflect on is we work with a large range of partners, and we realised really quickly that all the cash has dried up. So we'll lose, and I don't mind being transparent here, we'll lose $1 million this financial year. We'll lose easily $1 million next financial year, which for a not-for-profit is a lot of money. But we realised very quickly that it's not about asking for money anymore. The cash is not there. What we need to do is provide value and expertise and evidence-based help around what's going on. And our whole fundraising team flipped to that model about 3 weeks ago and stopped fundraising basically and started communicating. And what we found was it actually worked in reverse. So this week alone, I picked up 3 new partnerships with major sporting codes that we couldn't get anywhere near to besides before this. So I'd really encourage everybody to think about ways in which they can put away the sales pitch, put away the elevator pitch, and find a way that you can provide real value without any thought of that coming back. And I think in time that will come back to you. And so Black Dog, in terms of answering Christian Hailey, what they're doing in that content space, I'll share a link after this to our coronavirus page, but we are putting up daily expertise, evidence-based, scientifically critiqued models to help you get through this. So things like, what do you do, like me, if if you're homeschooling and you've got your daughter with you, how do you do that during the day? How do you cope with that anxiety? And what do you do if you start to feel isolated? What are we doing for health professionals? We've got 19 apps in market and an online clinic which can help you diagnose where you're at with your mental health. So there's a range of tools on that page where we're constantly communicating that. And back to that original model, that communication, that expertise, that sort of leadership in that space to say this is what is going on, is bringing enormous amount of people to us. So I'd really encourage to do that with your sponsors and the people that you work with, and love them to death. The first thing we did when coronavirus stopped is we stopped as a team. We're 18 in a team. We got on the phones and we called every high value partner, donor, everyone we know. And the first question we said is, what can we do to help? And we found that strategy working for us.
Yeah, great. So, I mean, I think that's a really good example of changing what your content is to what people's needs are at this time. Nikki, I'm going to take it back to you, because there's obviously, you know, a lot of event agencies, there's a lot of brands, there's a lot of sponsors that depended on events for their content, but they may not have actually produced any content from that. So there's actually a lot of businesses right now that have nothing to talk about. And so what is it that they should be talking about, you know, if they've never filmed their event before, so they don't have all these archives that for them to go into, you know, and we do know, I mean, I know from a personal point of view, I don't want to be sold to right now. I want to just consume content that I enjoy. So do you have some advice for people that, you know, are in the sponsorship game, or brand, or, you know, own events but don't have that content?
I mean, it's going to depend on your brand, and each brand is very, very different. If you don't have, you know, existing content that you can tap into, you know, filming isn't possible at the moment. So it's about, and if you did want to go into that space, it's about using the technologies that is available. What assets can you tap into, and marry them up with the technology that we have, to, you know, to put something forward. I think particularly in this time, people need to feel like a connection to something. So you don't want, it's not about pretty pictures, it's not about, you know, like sales pitches, as you touched on before. There has to be some sort of connection. There has to be, you know, it has to be relevant to, you know, what everybody is facing. I mean, everybody enjoys a funny video, and you know, because it takes your mind off stuff, and that's really great. But it's also, people want an emotional connection to what they're watching, you know, as well. It's not just about, you know, watching dance videos on TikTok. Well, you know, but again, it depends on what your brand is. But I guess it's about what assets do you have, and then how can you utilize them in our current climate? And that would vary so much from brand to brand.
Yeah, for sure. Jamie, with your club, how are your sponsors quite on board with the digital channels that they've got available now? Because obviously in football, there's a lot of, you know, big branded signs that go on the football pitch, but that's not happening right now.
Correct. Yeah. Firstly, our digital channels, unlike Nikki's, they're probably not as big as F1's. Ours are. We've got about 350,000 people on our major three platforms that we use, and our major sponsors, our big sponsors, have all been well across the digital space for many, many years. So they are right on board. But there's a lot of smaller sponsors you have in clubs, the sponsors that sponsor players and so forth, that are our game day sponsors. And a lot of them, they do want that billboard that's around the edge of the ground and so forth. And with no games being played, they've really been forced to look at the digital space. And a lot of them have seen what a wonderful experience it is to use that digital platform to communicate to people and communicate across various channels to different audiences that they haven't engaged with in the past. So for us, it's a real positive coming out of the digital space, with sponsors now getting on board. And I think this will become a really good asset in the future. When you go and talk to a smaller sponsor, they'll want to get access to the digital channels, where in the past, it wasn't something that did interest them. This is it's sort of forced them in a way to have to use this space. And it's becoming a really, really good asset for us. And again, as I said, that's why we're repurposing our events team into digital, because we've got so much more content that we're being able to produce for everybody. But I have to say again, we've been very lucky with our majors, because they've been across the digital space for many years, and they use it really well. And now it's great to see these smaller sponsors coming on board and really enjoying it as well. Hailey, you're on mute now.
Hello, I'm back. That's great. So Trevor had put before the crystal ball has been shattered, which is true, but I'm going to ask Nikki for her crystal ball. What do you, so once we go back live, because this is going to end, right? And it will end in stages, but at some point we're going to go back to having live events. How do you think this period that we're in, and with the new technologies that are coming out, what do you think that's going to look like in the next 9 to 12 months?
I think you guys tapped on it before in terms of, considering the financial situation that people are going to be in, are they going to spend their money to go to a live event, or are they going to, sit at home and consume the content? So that's going to depend on people's household, obviously. But I think speaking to the content side of it, I think this is probably, it's put us all in a position where we have to be more creative and think outside of what have been doing. And I think that that's a good thing, because sometimes, like the NRL, F1 is, every 2 weeks or more. It's the same thing. It's just a different scenery if you think about it in the most basic of terms. So finding the stories there, so certainly as the Red Bull brand, because we don't showcase the race, that's F1's. So we're about finding the stories within that. And I think this forces you to think outside of what you have been doing and how content will be consumed, what, even from what platforms people are looking at. Do they want the, short, really quick grabs? Do they want something that's a little bit more meaningful and on longer platforms? So I think over the next few months, the digital teams in brands will be looking at how content that is being put up is being consumed, and then us filming people will need to adapt to that to see, because there very well may be a shift in terms of what people want to see, because their lives have changed. So and that's difficult to know how it is, but here in Australia, we've got another 90 days of isolation. By the end of that, our mindsets are going to be so different. So it's just like, how is it that we're going to want to consume that content? And I think that, everybody that certainly works in the digital space will be looking at that very closely, and we'll need to adapt to that, because it's hard to imagine that we'll just go back to how it was.
Yeah, I mean, look, I may be wrong in this, but so looking at our industry, maybe even since the 80s or 90s, we were very together as a community at one point. And then the digital age came and we thought, we now need just to tell people what it is that they're seeing and what they're viewing. And this that we've gone into, that we are in isolation, what I'm seeing a lot is people are starting to ask for what it is that they want, and there's starting to be more of a two-way conversation over tech, and maybe that is something that we can bring into events later on down the track, because I don't know how we're going to go from completely online right now for the next 90 days as it was, to then going to live events without it having some sort of effect. So CT and I have been talking about this quite a lot, and there's actually quite a few questions that I'm having through as well, is these different stages of going from this, we'll call it the normal, last month, into isolation, and then what those stages look like for events coming up and throughout the year. Can we predict that? I think that I'm going to pass over to CT.
Yeah, I think, and we'll go through the stages, but I think what we're going to see here is exactly what Nikki is saying and yourself saying, is along the way, so we're going to go through these stages, but along the way, we're going to see innovation which to me is absolutely exciting. I think we're being forced into looking at things differently. We're being forced into a situation of thinking, how do I survive, or what can I do differently? Like, what everyone else is doing this, what are we going to do differently? From the stages point of view, what we're seeing now is, we're seeing this move to 100% online, and that's not just with the events or sports space, but this is a short-term approach of people needing to survive, or needing to create things around themselves to try and move into the next steps, stay relevant, and those sorts of things. We'll then move back into behind closed doors. We've obviously already been in that space a bit, and Jamie's touched on that as well. It's not news to everyone, but that is something that we're going to end up moving back into as our next step. Without spectators, that'll be the first thing that starts to happen. We're then going to probably go into, or maybe at the same time, something which we've been doing for a number of years, which I think is something that a lot more people are going to get down to, is that we're going to get into non-spectator projects and webcast events. So we're getting people creating events and creating special, unique experiences in potentially in remote locations, which can be shown, and expanded out to the world, to millions of people. So I think people are going to start to think a bit more creative and be prepared to spend in that space, which in the past they maybe haven't, because the easy money was to do something where we could get spectators. So maybe this is an opportunity for people to think outside the box, and for brands to think outside of the box and say, how about we do this? And that might be a really good space for a lot of people to play in. We're obviously then going to move back into, at some point, we obviously don't know when, but we're going to move back into events back being live. And it's going to start out to smaller groups, is what we would expect. So we're sort of unfolding in the way that we folded up. Obviously, we folded up pretty quick, but we're going to go back in the opposite direction. And so those events are going to be to smaller numbers. And so people are going to have to be creative in how do they get around that. And, we're going to see maybe some new technologies to speed things up. We're going to see, less interaction maybe with the participants, and going to see people push off in smaller waves if we're talking about walking events or running events. So there are going to be a lot of different things happening there. Maybe bringing in the social distancing ideas into that situation, so that we can minimise any of those risks, because we're still going to be in that small space. We're then going to unfold into, say, medium group of spectators and participants, and then obviously large groups, as we were normal prior to the COVID. But I think for me, what I really think will happen is same as what you guys are talking about. And I think it's exciting, because I think that what we're going to see is some kind of hybrid of offline and online. And, who knows what else people are going to come up with. And, I think that's pretty exciting. So let's hope that people are starting to think like that, and looking down the line, and let's see what really comes out.
Currently we're coming up to an hour, so I'm just going to, I've got one more question for Taz. This is more of a, I suppose, long-term view of, like, what does success look like for Black Dog with mental health? And let's do this specifically for the sports and entertainment industry. Of, at the end of the year, what is it that we should be looking to have achieved with our relationships with our suppliers and our subcontractors and our staff and our employees?
It's a really good question. I think authenticity is the ultimate end goal, is having real connection with your suppliers and your partners and your clients in an authentic and credible way. So that means, and as I was hearing that content discussion, it's so fascinating. I think just get really clear on your why. What is your purpose? Why are you here? And I think the content that you can produce around that and being authentic. So if you're a catering company, do catering at home. If you're an event company that puts on special events, do a special event in your home and feel it and film it and do unusual things. So for Black Dog, we are very concentrated on making sure that 60% of people that don't seek help for their mental illness do go and get help. That's probably going to be online, and there's a whole number of assets which we'll share. So that's our main objective here, is to make sure that we don't slip into further unwellness throughout 2020.
And I think us as an industry need to do that to each other and look out for each other, and keep that top of mind when we are managing our relationships and managing expectations for the next 3, 6, 12 months. Thank you very much. There has been a couple of questions that have come through. Wes has asked, so essentially a lot of local authorities nationwide aren't accepting event applications. We're also finding this, is that they're accepting the applications, but they won't be processed or approved until they know what's going on. Unfortunately, a few councils as well have not got the same information that we can read on government websites. So that's actually proving to be quite difficult, and it is putting a lot of events in a really vulnerable space, because councils are essentially able to pick and choose who they then want to come. I think around terms of communication for that, Wes, from what we're doing and communicating to councils that we're working with, is that our event is different. And what we're trying to say is that we're super adaptable, that, there's going to be these different stages. And if you can figure out what stage your event sits in, so we have a walking event that we do, and that essentially will sit in probably can happen with events. So if we go to the stage where 500 plus people are not allowed in an outdoor space, we've already come up with these different social distancing ideas. We've actually even grafted a video that we can show we can show the council, but we can show our participants when they are ready. Nobody is ready for this right now. But when they are ready to say, we're actually not going to have any more than 50 people there, because we've changed the way that our ticketing system will work, and we've changed the way that our registration will work, and we're not going to do waves anymore. And this is how, we'll give 6 clear different ways that we're addressing social distancing within that stage. And I think it's about having that communication and relationships with council. So thanks for that question, because I think a lot of people are wondering, how do we organize an event when they're not actually able to get approved right now? We also had a question that came in right before we started. It was around the extra measures to put in place to let attendees know about social distancing, so when we can go. And I think I've just addressed that in the different stages. So that CT talked about, that we're going to have these different stages, and you can plan now to know that essentially the way that we went into this, we're going to come out of it like that. So if you can mold your event to work within one of those stages, and then communicate that clearly. We've done one sort of mock video so far, and it's kind of a cartoon explaining how we would manage social distancing. And the last question we had was, if an event was to get launched, a new event was to get launched at the end of the year, would we recommend, like, how would that be approached right now? And I think from what everyone on the panel has said tonight is that don't sell right now. Wait for a while. People aren't ready to be sold to right now. Bring in your community, talk to people. This is actually the time when your community or your attendees and your participants, it's actually the time that they need you, and they need you to listen to them. And they need just to have a break from being sold to. I don't know when that's going to stop. I, again, don't have a crystal ball, but you'll know when the time is right, when it's time to sell that again.
And if just on that, if they are your true community, they're going to want to be there and want to be there to support you and be a part of that. And we're seeing that even more now, that people wanting to connect and support the causes that they're most passionate about. So I think that's exactly what Hailey's saying, is that's your direction for that. And then when the time's right, then you can move forward with it.
Fabulous. Well, look, that takes us up to the hour, and that was an incredible first PanelCast. So thank you so much. That was really informative. I learned a lot too. It was really good hearing from you, Jamie. Thank you, Nikki, and thank you very much, Taz. Please feel free. So we're going to do this every Thursday night. We're going to have a different panel on. You can send us questions. You can either go onto the Facebook group. It is a private group, so just ask to join and we'll accept it. We'll also do a video record. So we've recorded this. We'll also put it onto our Facebook group. If you have any suggestions on who should be on the panel, or if you have suggestions of what questions or topics you want us to talk about, we're more than happy to take that on board. And hopefully it was really informative for you guys too. Thank you very much for all your questions, and please keep them coming, and hopefully we can answer them week to week.
Thanks, Hailey.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.